All right, and that brings us to our closer. You met him already. Joe Territo is, hold on 1 second, so president of the Rochester Baseball Historical Society. By day, he's an ophthalmic photographer, and off time from that, you'll know him as the official photographer for the Rochester Red Wings. He likes to tell his stories 1,000 words at a time, so we'll let him do that as he talks to us about baseball photography.
Thanks, Ryan. This is a much better way to spend an afternoon than Wrigley Leagues. That's for sure. I don't know what excuse I'm going to use tomorrow, though. So, baseball and photography grew up together. In 1826, Frenchman Joseph Nicephore Niepce, forgive my French, he takes a pewter plate coated with varnish and uses iodine crystals for developer to make a heliograph or a sun drawing of the courtyard outside of his workshop. He shared this primitive image with his friend Jacques Dugard. And in 1826, there was also baseball. Except players weren't using gloves, they weren't using Louisville sluggers, they weren't even using bases. Baseball in the early 19th century was referred to as town ball. Players used short bats and often swung them with one hand. There was no foul territory, no limit as to how many players were in the field. It was a wild game. Fielders threw the ball at the runners to record an out, and runners could flee to any part of the field to avoid being soaked or hit with the ball. Safe havens were 4-foot high stakes and not bases. The year before this sun drawing, this early form of baseball was being played in Rochester on the west bank of the Genesee River, just south of High Falls, about a block from Frontier Field in a pasture known as Mumford's Meadow. So 13 years after Niepce's primitive sun drawing, his partner Jacques Dugard announces to the world in 1839 that he has finally invented a way to record a high-quality positive image onto a polished sheet of silver-plated copper. Photography is born, and Dugard is its father. And that same year, across the Atlantic, in Cooperstown, New York, Abner Doubleday also invents baseball. Baseball is also born. Or is it? The father of baseball, Abner Doubleday, was at West Point Academy studying to become an officer in the Union Army during the summer of 1839. He was not in Cooperstown that summer. Baseball historians have scoured every word of his diary and letters, looking for baseball references, but to no avail. It's beyond strange that the inventor of baseball never mentions the game that he supposedly invented. Some have suggested that the famous Civil War general might not have even really been familiar with the game. How Doubleday became the mystical father of baseball is an interesting tale to be told at another talk. But let's just say that Abner Doubleday inventing baseball is like saying that the Easter Bunny invented Easter. It's just not true, but somehow they're forever linked. Unlike photography, baseball did not have a Louis Dugard. It had several fathers who helped shape it into what we know now as the American pastime. The men in this Dugariotype are the founders of the New York Knickerbockers Baseball Club. They and others had more to do with the invention of baseball than Abner Doubleday. The bylaws and rules that they adopted in the 1840s were the first rules of baseball. This daguerreotype is owned by collector Corey Shamus and is the only one in existence. So in 1859, baseball really didn't become the subject of a camera until September 3rd, 1859, when Brooklyn photographer Charles Williamson focused his lens on these guys. These are the men of the second generation of the New York Knickerbockers and the Excelsior's Baseball Club. And this is the first known photograph of baseball as a subject taken on a baseball field. It was taken at Elysian Fields in Hoboken, New Jersey, and this is also the site of the very first recorded baseball game in history, played on June 19, 1846, between the Knickerbockers and the New York Nine. Baseball and war go back to at least the Civil War. This photograph was made in 1862 by an unknown photographer. It documents soldiers playing a baseball game in the courtyard of Fort Pulaski in Georgia, behind an Army formation of the 48th New York Volunteers. The fort was captured by the Union Army the year that this photo was made, and this is believed to be the first photo of a baseball game in progress. This is the first professional baseball club in history, the Cincinnati Red Stockings. In 1869, the season in which this photo was made, the Red Stockings went on a national tour, humiliating some of the best amateur clubs in the country, finishing undefeated, winning 57 games. On June 4th, they came to Rochester to play our city's best team, the Rochester Alerts. 3,000 spectators crammed into Jones Square Park to watch the Red Stockings destroy the Rochester club 18-9. On September 2nd, Rochester then traveled to Cincinnati for a rematch at the Union grounds and got killed again, 32-19. During this period, trade cards started to come on the scene. They were used by companies to advertise, give the companies addresses and what they were selling. They would print that information on the back. They were printed on heavy card stock. These cards became highly collectible during the Victorian era. This trade card could be considered maybe the first baseball card. So, 72-year-old Bernice Gallego and her husband Al frequented estate sales and flea markets in Fresno, California. The two accumulated boxes of old stuff that they would use as inventory for their antique shop, and they also sold stuff on eBay. So in 2009, they were sorting through one of the boxes, and Mrs. Gallego came across this old card and thought that surely somebody might want to buy it, so she put it on eBay for $10. She became suspicious when an unusual amount of bids started to roll in immediately. So she became suspicious and she pulled it off of eBay. What she didn't know is that there's only about 5 of these cards in existence, and they're among the most sought-after artifacts by collectors. She wisely consigned with a reputable sports memorabilia auction house, and it fetched well over $75,000. So cabinet photos, they were pretty popular. In the 19th century, the cabinet photos were heavy cardstock, beautiful studio images. This is Ross Barnes from Mount Morris, New York. But in the 19th century, photography really required large, cumbersome cameras with slow shutter speeds. It didn't lend itself to photographing game action because the image would become blurry as the subjects moved across the glass plate. So the shutters had to be open for long periods of time. Photographers used posing stands, and I selected this picture because you can see the base of the posing stand right behind his left foot. Now there's a pole that goes up behind his leg, and it goes up to his head, and there's a little cradle that the head would rest in to hold him perfectly still during this long exposure. If any movement of the head shaking, it would just become a very unflattering, out of focus, blurry image. So what some photographers did when they tried to turn their camera to baseball on the field is they would stage these action photos. The photographer Arthur Irwin took this picture, and note the player in the upper right-hand corner, and you can see he kind of looks like a ghost. These guys that are demonstrating the play are holding perfectly still for a long period of time while the exposure is being made, and you can see the guy up in the upper right-hand corner, it was kind of moving, and so it looks kind of shadowy. So that's why action photography really was not a realistic endeavor for baseball back then. So here's a team photo of the Boston Bean Eaters made on opening day in 1886. It features Rochester native Charles Old Hoss Radmore. He is on the very end over here. He's on the top row. But what makes this picture special is keep your eye on Old Hoss. He apparently didn't like to have his photograph taken. So, you know, I'm glad there aren't any kids in the audience. So 1888, that was a big year for both baseball and photography. The Baseball Rules Committee reduces the number of balls from 6 to 4, and with 3 strikes in place and overhand pitching in place, we now see a game that's very similar to the baseball that we see today. And also in that same year, 1888, was a revolutionary year for photography, as George Eastman introduces the Kodak #1. It's a handheld box camera, the first camera ever to use roll film. The camera came loaded with 100 exposures. The amateur photographer would take the pictures and send the entire camera back and get pictures back along with freshly loaded camera. This made photography very easy and more portable and available for the masses. So we can see now how photography and baseball are sort of kind of going together, sharing a lot of same common evolution. So by the turn of the century, New York City photographer Charles Conlon was capturing and freezing the action of baseball fairly well with his new Graflex camera. With its focal plane shutter, the Graflex was able to achieve a little bit of a faster shutter speed. So Conlon's photo of Ty Cobb going hard into third baseman Jimmy Austin during a game on July 23rd, 1910 is a great example of very early action photography. And I consider this to be one of the greatest baseball photos in history. It shows the fierceness in which Ty Cobb played the game. With Cobb on second base, Austin was playing in, anticipating a bunt. As the batter squared off, Cobb took off for third. The hitter missed the bunt, and the catcher came up throwing to third to try to get the charging Cobb, but it was too late because he had already upended Austin, and the throw sailed into left field. Cobb popped up and proceeded home. Conlon, under the cloth hood of his Graflex camera, which was also mounted on a giant wooden tripod, was on the field, standing just to the left of the third base coach. He had one chance to get this single glass plate exposed. I can't imagine what Conlon would have done with my 10 frames per second camera. So back then, you would have to squeeze a rubber bulb with air that was attached to a cable, and when you squeezed that bulb, a pin would come out and activate the shutter. So Conlon wasn't sure whether he squeezed that bulb hard enough to make the image. So just in case, he just kept the glass, or he changed out the glass film in the back of the camera and reloaded it. A lot of times photographers back then, they would say, oh, I didn't squeeze that bulb hard enough. I'm just going to leave the glass plate in there for the next picture. And if you would have done that, we wouldn't have had the greatest picture, greatest action baseball picture ever. So we're going to go on and talk a little bit about portraits. Carl Horner's 1902 portrait of Pittsburgh Pirates shortstop Honus Wagner became one of the most famous baseball portraits ever for what it became. The most valuable baseball card in history. The T206 series baseball cards, also known as tobacco cards, were produced from 1909 until 1911. They came in cigarette packs and quickly became highly collectible back then, and they still are today. When Honus Wagner realized that his likeness was being used to sell cigarettes, he became outraged and demanded that they discontinue using his image. The story goes that he didn't want children buying cigarettes in order to get his card, but some say that he was simply not happy with the compensation or the lack thereof that he was getting for the use of his picture. So as a result, there were less than 200 produced, with roughly 60 still surviving today. The most highly rated card in terms of condition has had an interesting history. This near pristine card was once owned by Wayne Gretzky. It came to market in 2013 and fetched $2.1 million at auction. But more recently, thanks to a great article, Scott, that you wrote a few weeks ago, I learned that it recently sold for $3.12 million. A little bit more about portraits. A good portrait captures the personality of the subject. Christy Mathewson was a kind, gentle person, and as this 1910 portrait by photographer Paul Thompson conveys, his nickname was the Christian Gentleman. I love making portraits. I made this portrait of Syracuse Chiefs outfielder Darren Mastroianni in 2015. I took it just before the start of a game at Frontier Field. Mastro was just sitting in the dugout getting mentally prepared for the game. I don't even really think he saw me take the picture, but nonetheless it kind of conveys the intensity in which Mastro plays the game. The Mathewson portrait is kind of the inspiration for this one, with the selective focus. Boy, that's kind of saturated. It looks different. Okay. With a selective focus that was used with the old style cameras. But it also has a striking similarity to another famous portrait of the Babe, taken by Nicholas Murray in 1927. And speaking of the Babe, let's look at another famous photo. Ruth's mystical called shot during the 1932 World Series against the Chicago Cubs at Wrigley. This is a single frame taken from a 16mm film, which was shot by an amateur photographer, Matthew Crandall. It kind of resembles Niepce's sun drawing from 1826. The quality is horrible, but nonetheless, it seems to confirm the myth that Babe, in defiance of the heckling Chicago fans and players with 2 strikes on, paused and pointed to the outfield wall, and then proceeded to deposit the ball over the wall on the very next pitch. I just threw this one in because I love seeing Pete Rose wearing a Red Wings cap. I obviously took this this year when he made an appearance here. Before the introduction of the slide film Kodachrome, color photography was a scientific and experimental endeavor, not widely available to most photographers. In fact, it wasn't until the movie Gone with the Wind in 1939 did the masses really get a chance to see color photographic images. Also in 1939, 100 years after photography was born, 20-year-old Ted Williams began his Hall of Fame career with the Boston Red Sox. That year, the Boston Globe sent Arthur Griffin, a photographer, to photograph Ted Williams with this new color film. Kodak wanted it field tested. The film was very slow, and Griffin had to take numerous exposures. It took him about 2 hours to make this photo, which is so surprising that Ted would allow somebody to work with him for 2 hours. He was kind of known not to have the best temperament when it came to media. Kodak led the way when it came to allowing photographers to stop action consistently with the introduction of Tri-X film in 1954, and then high-speed color film Ektachrome in 1959. And also during this time in baseball, it was entering its golden age expansion. Some iconic photos that we're probably all familiar with. There's so many iconic photos, but I had to kind of narrow it down. This is July 4th, 1939. Photographer Murray Becker documents Lou Gehrig's famous speech in which he proclaims to be the luckiest man on the face of the earth, despite being struck with a fatal disease. So this is considered baseball's Gettysburg Address. And then on April 24th, 1947, this famous photograph taken by Nat Feen wins a Pulitzer Prize, Babe Ruth's farewell speech. Babe died the next year. And the picture known as The Catch, Willie Mays, of course, Game 1 of the 1954 World Series, photographer Frank Hurley. According to Yogi, he was out. Game 1 of the 1955 World Series, again by photographer Frank Hurley. And I understand that every time Yogi was signing this picture, he'd always inscribe, "He was out." So one of my favorite photographers was Walter Ives Jr. From Sports Illustrated. In 1960, at the age of 17, Walter got his start at Sports Illustrated and began capturing some of the best baseball images of the modern era. Here are some of his memorable photographs. How'd you like to see that staring at you? And now, this is not Walter's work, but now in the digital age, we're equipped with powerful cameras and software. San Francisco photographer Brad Mannion embraced the digital age a number of years ago when he published in Sports Illustrated a series of Instagram photos taken with a cell phone. So photography continues to evolve, baseball also continues to evolve together. These new images are what the modern eye sees, and I'm really inspired by them. So of course I'm obsessed with shooting game action, but as a team photographer we cover the entire organization. We shoot the team photo, front office staff portraits, on-field ceremonies, fans having fun, you name it, we shoot it. And then comes hours upon hours of editing tens of thousands of pictures along with organizing and archiving. We'll just run through some pictures that I took this season. My season every year starts out at spring training at Hammond Stadium, the spring home of the Twins. I love catching up with former Red Wings, Rene Rivera there as a Tampa Bay Ray, and Chris Parmalee playing for the Yankees. That was this spring. Rivera wound up with the Mets eventually this year. And legends, of course, Reggie is always at spring training. This is a sort of an infrared image of Dustin Pedroia. One of my better action pictures from this spring, Bryce Brentz from the Red Sox. Tommy Field, this picture was taken on the very last home game this year, and it kind of, speaks to how the season ended for the Red Wings. Despite an extraordinary effort, the playoffs were just out of reach, just like that baseball was for Tommy Field. This guy's a real acrobat, Alfredo Tovar. It's always cool to shoot things that are, the fans might not really see. They show up at the ballpark and that R is already there behind home plate. So it's kind of interesting to show sort of the behind the scenes. That's Ryan Hare, one of our great groundskeepers. This guy turned out to be one heck of a left fielder, Walker. I really like the vantage point of shooting up in the stands because you get this very plain background because I'm shooting down with the grass, and it really isolates the player nicely. I really pay attention to my backgrounds when I get ready to compose pictures. Sometimes you don't have the luxury of getting ready when it comes time to compose pictures, but I do the best I can to keep the background always in the back of my mind when I'm pointing my lens. He said every time I point the camera toward him, it just lights up. And he's a great guy for the team to have in the dugout. He keeps pretty loose in there. I guess that's my version of Willie Mays' catch. That's kind of why I went black and white with it. Always trying to capture peak action.
Good evening. The library will be closing in 10 minutes. Computers, copiers, and reader printers will be turned off now.
What's that?
It's subtle.
Subtle?
Ladies, desk up.
So this is obviously a very close-up shot of the field, and this one I took a few weeks ago from the top of Kodak Tower. And Sharada got us up there and took this view of the stadium that we don't get to see a lot. I've photographed the stadium from Buckingham, the Buckingham building there, that orange building. I've been up there several times and shot it from that direction.
Joe, have you ever taken a picture during a game like that?
No, this is the first time I've ever photographed it from this. I have from the Buckingham building.
That's a very reminiscent of the Life magazine photograph from the Cathedral of Learning in Pittsburgh.
Oh, yeah?
1960 World Series, which is my favorite photo.
Do you know if that one will be in the calendar for the coming year?
I don't know if I should announce that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, now.
That's one of my goals for the next season is to get up there and shoot a game in progress. Any questions? Comments?
Fantastic.
Thank you.
We should mention the photo Joe had of Tommy Field diving for the ball that was just out of reach was nominated for Minor League Baseball Photo of the Year this year. Finished in third place, but it was the highest action photo. So I think we can unofficially give Joe the award for the best minor league action photo. All right. Again, thank you all for coming. I think we finished just in time, as the overhead announcement let us know. Just for some upcoming events that we have. In mid-December, we're going to have a baseball book club where we're going to discuss Glory of Their Times. It's the 60th anniversary since that was printed. We'll be sending out emails about that early next week to hopefully nail down date, time, and location. Our major annual event, our annual Hot Stove Dinner, is going to take place Saturday, January 28th at Frontier Field again, as it has the last couple of years. Special guest this year is going to be Tom Shiver, who's the National Baseball Hall of Fame Senior Curator. And we'll have tickets on sale for that soon. It always sells out every year very quickly, so don't delay when you get the email. The tickets are on sale. And hoping to do another baseball talk series like this in March. If any of you have ideas for talks, would like to give one, we're always very open to that. I'll be sending out a solicitation for some abstracts in early January. And again, we'd love to have different faces up here presenting, and we hope that you all had fun today. I think the best presentations leave people wanting more, and hopefully we've left you with that today. So thanks again for coming and spending your Saturday afternoon with us.
Well done.
Informally, I think a couple people are going to head over to the Dinosaur Barbecue after this. So if you were interested at all, just head over. I'm sure it'll be busy with it being a Saturday night, but there'll be some continued baseball conversation over there.
Thanks, Joe. When I had James Parsons to sign this, he wanted to compliment them, and I told him the source. Did he ever come to you? How are you, sir? That's a great
That's a famous source. Pittsburgh, yeah.
See ya.
Good to see you, Gary. Take care. See you soon.
If you've looked at pictures from that side, you say,
I think the first reaction was awesome.
the photos from the first play of the
SABR
It's very interesting. I said, I think I was round 8, I guess, and I think that they've had, I know, 5 more songs. They come in old one, people really notice. You know, people on Facebook, whatever, 30 plus years.
Oh, yes.
They distinctly said it was his bad. You can get Sal, but you can get bill coverage. But it's mainly not the right part.